Welcome to DevSecOps101. To do or not to do, platforms do matter. My name is Ruiz. I'm a senior software developer and a developer advocate at JFrog. You can find me in Mastodon, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So, what are we going to talk about today? This is DevSecOps101. So, the first interesting question is, what is DevSecOps? Why is so important? Why are so many organizations so keen or desperate even to adopt it? What are the benefits that we should expect? How do we measure success? Let's see how the top adopters of DevSecOps practices are doing. Let's dream a little about what could be our future. We will also discuss why not. There are so many organizations that are still stuck in the process of adopting the DevSecOps practices that we need to question what are the challenges that they are facing. And finally, we're going to talk about a topic that, in my opinion, it's critical, but we are not discussing it as often as we should. Adopting a platform. Let us get started. What is DevSecOps? So, DevSecOps, it is out there, and it has been for several years. But there is not a gold standard in terms of the definition. And you will find that there are different big companies that are going to be using some of the concepts, the critical concept or the key concepts of DevSecOps practices. So, what is DevSecOps? Some will say that it's a development practice that integrates security initiatives at the early stages in the life cycle of software development. And it has several mantras. So everybody is accountable for security. It's an approach to culture, automation, and platform designs that integrate security. Incorporates testing, triage, risk mitigation in any part of the CI/CD workflow. So the definitions may vary a little bit, but they will have common concepts. Well, the first one is it actually began from the idea of where developer security and operations join. Because at the beginning, when DevOps started coming together into the industry, it was because we had silos. Developers and operations didn't play that nicely together. And so we needed a way to change our game plan. And DevSecOps, DevOps actually was born. Then later on, security, well, it's not that it started to have a more predominant place, because security, it is always important. When do you should care about security? Always. When do you should start minding security? Since the beginning. But this started to have a different view. Instead of waiting at the end of the software development cycle, it was too late. It was too expensive. We were already losing time. So the idea is, if it's so important, we have to bring it as soon as possible into the entire workflow. We need to involve the developers because they are our first and most important key players when developing software. So, what other concepts are very, very important for DevSecOps? Well, obviously the ones that also are coming from DevOps. Continuous automation, integration, deployment. As in DevOps, DevSecOps is also about culture, about giving accountability or having accountability the entire team, and ownership of the entire process. With DevOps and DevSecOps, we have now new metrics to measure how well are we developing and delivering software. Our deployment frequency, lead times for change file failure rate, and time to restore service. So these are two definitions that I really like. DevSecOps stands for Development Security and Operations, involves culture, automation, and platform design that integrates security as a shared responsibility through the entire IT lifecycle. So see, this is a really interesting point. It's not only the software development cycle anymore, because when we deliver or deploy something, there has been so many steps all the way that we need to think bigger. So at JFrog, we think that anything that involves actually delivering continuously software, it is important. But the key part is we have such a focus on security that this is what we are going to provide to our customers. This idea, but first and foremost, in a very secure way. So let me tell you why are we so keen about doing DevSecOps. Report after report is telling us how the industry is dealing with DevOps, software development, adoptions, what are the advantages, what are the challenges. So let's see it by the numbers, DevOps and DevSecOps. What are the metrics? At the beginning, I hinted at by applying the DevSecOps practices or the DevOps practices, we can measure how well we are delivering our software, how well we are actually providing to our customers or users, depending on what we are developing here. So for example, in the DORA report of 2022, we see, like for example, these 4 metrics of delivery and operational performance: lead time for changes, deployment frequency, time to restore service, change failure rate. As you can see in the slides, I have the sources. So if you ever want to read out the reports, you have the reference all there. So what do we mean by this? And I said we have 4 metrics. And as you see, those 4 metrics are going to improve, for example, the throughput of our software and the stability. And in general, because we will have this combination, we will have a better operational performance. So what is the lead time for changes? Here, the question that you should be asking is how long does it take to go from code committed to code successfully running in production? That is lead time for changes. So in theory, you will want this to be as short as possible. We will see what short as possible means. Deployment frequency. How often does your organization deploy code to production or release it to the end user? How many times a day do you push a new version? Time to restore a service. How long does it generally take to restore service when a service incident or defect impacts users? An unplanned outage or service impairment. So this is something that you should also be considered. It's restore service or remediation, and we will talk a little bit about that in more detail. The change failure rate. What percentage of changes to production or release to users result in degraded services? So how often are we introducing things that are having a negative impact to our users? And as I said, the combination, when we either increase one or reduce one, because it depends on what is the nature or what is the metric that we are referring to, if we have the best numbers there, we will have a better operational performance and more reliability in our services. So, for example, in the DORA report, we have and this is a statement. Top DevOps performers restore service after an incident within a day, have less than 15% change failure rate, and deploy changes to their code multiple times a day instead of several days, weeks, or months. So not only they are changing code, deploying it fast, the code that they are pushing to the users has less issues, and they can do it whenever they want. Because this is the important part. When the several organizations say, well, I can deploy in 10 minutes. For some industry, deployment every single 10 minutes or every single minute doesn't actually make sense. Sometimes the red tape is so much that it actually doesn't make sense. So what we want here is the organization or the team to have the ability to deploy whenever they want. And that's the key part. But let's continue. How? How do the organizations are going to improve their software development or the software quality or these metrics for performance and operations? Well, in red, you will have the adopters that are still starting. In blue, the middle ground, the ones that, we have done our homework, but we're still not there yet. And the top ones, the top adopters, that they are, like, for example, think about Netflix, think about Airbnb, Booking, all these organizations that have such a dynamic deployment times that it is amazing. Well, I won't start with the names, but let's see how do they behave, because this is the important part. So for an early adopter, for example, the lead time for changes, it can be between once per month or once every 6 months. If you have mildly adopted, like you're in the middle, it will be once per week to once per month. And for the tops, on demand. The deployment frequency is similar, once a month or once every 6 months, once a week to once a month, every day to once per week. Time to restore service. It can take you a week or even a month. It can take you a day towards a week, or it can take you less than a day. Change failure rate. Every single deployment has high chances of introducing an issue that is going to degrade the service or the quality. If you're in the middle, it is going to be like from 60% to 30%. If you are in the top adopters, it's going to be between 0 and 50%. So that is incredible. This is the reason why managers want us to adopt DevOps and DevSecOps policies as soon as possible. So for example, this is another view in the DORA report. For the elite performers, the top of the adopters, they were able to deploy 2,000 times faster to recover a service. And the change failure rate, they cut it by 1/7. Like, it was so unlikely it was this going to happen. So as you can see, the benefit from adopting and going and really adopting, like really planning adopting the best practices, using the right tools, defining the right policies, and actually having all the teams using in a specific way of developing, deployment, and integrating their software, it actually pays off. So let's see some more stats from the different reports. So according to the DevOps Global Market Report in 2023, 80% of DevOps implementation is ongoing. So in the Harvard Business Review Analytics of 2018, they were, even at that time, and this is the important part that I wanted to mention, in 2018, they were saying like the top IT leaders or the top leaders of the different organizations were thinking about adopting it as soon as possible. It was in their plans for next year. So at that time, they were like 70%, 77% of the respondents at the top management level said that it was in their plans. In the DevOps Global Market Report, we're seeing that yes, we're like 80% of the respondent that actually is between the different organizations and continent are saying that yes, they are doing it. The Harvard Business Review, it was a service survey with more than 600 respondents. And 70% in the same survey, the DORA report, 70% of the respondents managed to balance high stability with high reliability and high throughput. So even though that we have top and elite performance, as you can see from the people that were surveyed, they still were not the common example. But managing the three as a high level, it is a great achievement. And 30% of the DevOps teams meet the 5 essential characteristics of cloud computing. And what are the 5 essential characteristics? On-demand self-service. This is provisioning resources and when you need it and automatically. Rapid elasticity. Resource pooling in a multi-tenant architecture. Broad network usage and measurements in usage. Observability. According to the DORA survey, found that 54% of engineers are using DevOps practices to deploy containerized applications. So you're thinking about cloud native. So it is really important. Like if you are not following the DevOps practices, of DevSecOps practices, and you want to go into microservices or containerization or serverless, I strongly recommend you to think twice that decision. And it's good to know that people that are gone through that path are already using DevOps and DevSecOps practices. And Transposit shows in their report that 20% of teams integrate DevOps tools into one platform to reduce complexity. Why? Because using multiple tools separately increases complexity and blind spot. And again, this, like an adoption of the practices of DevSecOps of DevOps, there are different levels of integration to their tools, and we will see a little bit more about it. So in the state of DevOps automation, equally from Transposit, 63% of respondents reported an increase in the frequency of service incidents. And 52 reported that the amount of time to take them to resolve incidents is also increasing. So this is the 2 reasons why we need to have better tools, better integration, better responses. Because it's happening more frequently and it's taking us more time to solve them. And finally, this is just to give you an idea. For example, the DevOps market is going to balloon from 10.84 billions into 25 billions in 4 years. So the expected growth in this particular market, it is really big. Why not? What is our problem? What are our challenges? Well, it turns out that in the 2023 State of DevOps report by Puppet, it shows that one of the reasons, or these are the top 4 reasons why we don't, or why we are not adopting DevOps or DevSecOps practices in our development teams or IT teams. There is a skill shortage, legacy architecture, there is resistance to change, and we don't know really well what tools to use to start the automation or how to abstract what we need to implement an effective automation. So as I said, DevOps and DevSecOps, it's a series of best practices, a series of ideas, cultural change that we need to implement with different policies, with different practice, and with different tools. So this is what takes me to the next comment or the next topics. What tools? And remember when I said how the market is going to grow? Well, the thing is that it's also happening with tools. We can find a lot of tools out there. And don't get me wrong, many are really good. But the key question here is the integration of these tools. So again, this is a Trump-Possit report and of the states of DevOps automation. And they're looking at this and saying, many of the organizations are saying that the 24, almost 25% of the organizations, they say, we have our tools integrated. There are other organizations, actually the big number, it is in some of their tools are integrated. And there is still a number of people that they have no integration between tools. So it's a little bit more manual. Not manual the tasks, but the integration between them. And everybody knows that when you add a new tool, it's not as simple as go on shopping cart, put it. No, because you need to evaluate, you need to configure, you need to solve issues when they occur. So what happens if you have two tools that are not seamlessly integrated between them? Now you're adding an extra layer of complexity. So integration is key to reduce friction and complexity, blind spot. So let's talk about integration, but integration in the concept of a platform. And let's talk about a critical example, because I can sit down and tell you a big story about how do I see the future, why should we go in that direction. But I like to talk about the examples that we had in the past, those beautiful examples that show us what we can expect in the present and in the future. So let's talk about Linux, and in particular the Linux adoption. So the Linux adoption, and I can see it in two different stages, before 2000 and after 2006. So Linux was developed in 1991 by Linus Torvalds. And at that point, and I have to say I'm a really early adopter, and I won't say of what year because I'm going to be dating myself, but I was an early adopter. And I was very, very enthusiastic. And I remember that we used to go to a university to burn CDs, because they're like, at that time, FTPs or a thing like that, it was not a thing. So that was the level of enthusiasm that I had for this particular operating system. When we see the big explosion, it's after 2006 when the kernel mode settings was introduced. Why was, not only because of the distribution, there were some already distros available at that time, but the other problem is that when you needed to sit down and install the operating system, chances are you had to recompile the kernel. First, even find out what are the drivers that you need to use. Second, like once you, fingers crossed, found the drivers, recompile the kernel, and everything will work. Everything will work as you expected, in the way that you expected. And it was super powerful. But this level of complexity, this level of extra knowledge, that even though the early adopters were developers or technology enthusiasts, you still were adding an extra level of complexity that not everybody understood or had the possibility to to learn. After 2008, what happened? After we have this kernel model system for the drivers. Well, in 2022, 100% of the world top 500 supercomputers run on Linux. 90% of all cloud infrastructure operate on Linux. 96.3% of the world's top 1 million servers run on Linux. This is the power of having less issues with powerful tools. It's not that it is not usable in itself, but if you are introducing friction, then even the best tool is not going to be as useful as it can be. So let's bring it back, this idea, to DevSecOps. So the DevSecOps platform, what are the risks if we don't integrate them, or we don't adopt it, or we don't choose it, or we have some of our tools integrated or not, or we are not integrated at all our tools? Well, one of the possible risks that, for example, the State of DevOps Automation 2022 from Transposit has detected is that increase the risk of delay in the remediation process, increase the downtime, decrease the quality of service because of the reliability of our services is going down, and the overall operational impact, it takes a toll. So without, yes, and sorry for that, this was the response of 75% of the organizations that actually were consulted for this particular report. So a lot of people that are using different tools agree that this is the problem. These are the challenges that they're facing when they don't have, per se, a platform. And for example, 58% of the respondents report that the downtime, like for example, application outages, service degradation, costs their organization up to almost half, like 500,000 per hour on average. Companies cannot waste this time going between various different tools and taking action manually. So this is not working. Even if you have the best tool ever, if you're still wasting time between the different tools because they are not integrated and they are creating blind spots between themselves, it is a problem. So we do need to have a platform. We do need to look for tools that are best or better integrated in the different phases of software development. And of course, you're here, you are a JFrog, and a good news for you. So we actually have a product or a solution for every single stage, from build and test, release and deploy. We take, as I told you, we take security so seriously that we are providing so much information about who, what, why. We provide you with insights, like who is using what. You can actually enrich data with information so the rest of the development teams in other organizations, in other places of your organization, can leverage all this information that you are acquiring. And you can distribute in so many ways. So that is my good news to you. We have several tools that are helping you in all the phases. We integrate very, very nicely because they belong to us, and security is a first-class citizen. And not only that, we're providing integrations with the IDE to make it the life of developers easier. We are using all over the software development cycle the triggers about, and extracting, as I said, extracted information about what is going on. Because what is going on will give you a key understanding on what you can fix. So from curating to building and consuming the software. In curating, this is some functionality that is really new to us. Well, it's not so new. We have had it for more than 4 months right now. So if you want to know about how can you How can JFrog help you and your developers actually to start using the best, for example, dependencies since day zero? Then this is a conversation that we should take more seriously. Okay, and this was a little bit about why platforms do matter and what is DevSecOps, what are the benefits, what are the challenges, and if you have any question, any comment, I'm always looking for feedback to improve my presentations. Please contact me at LinkedIn, Twitter, Mastodon, or at JFrog. Thank you very much.